Hi everyone, welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. I am Bonnie Krebs, creator of Watercolor the Art Impressions Way, and I am back with another project for this week. This one is a bit of a challenge, and I think you're going to really have fun with it. I don't mean challenge in that it's really hard to do or harder than any of the projects that I've done, but the composition is a little more complex, and all that means is that we're using more stamps. So more stamps takes a little bit more time in planning, but so fun to do and still just as easy. If you break it down into separate little sections, it's just as easy as some of the simple projects we've done. So let's get going. We're going to need a few things. So we're going to start out with the window set. And if you look at this window set here, this is the one we're going to use. I'm just going to use this area, so we're not going to use these shutters. And remember, with stamping, you just ink the areas that you want. So I'm just going to use this center part, and this time leave the shutters off. I'm also going to use a little window box here. So this little planter, we're going to put that underneath the window and put that together. I also tried to, on this project, use things that I haven't used in a video or haven't used in a really, really long time. One of them is this little planter here. Another one is this little watering can. This little pot, I don't know if I've used that, so I want to kind of go back and make sure that I get some of these elements in that I haven't used in the past. So these two. We're also going to use, here's that little watering can, and it's in the mini wishing well set. So this one right here, I'm going to use that. In the little mini critter set, we're going to use this little cat. I just love this little guy. He just fits anywhere. In the small container set, so this one right here, I'm going to use that one. Now we get into the flowers and the foliage. So if you look at this, it's really your choice what you put in here. So I'm going to show you how to put this particular composition together, but you can see that you can use vines and long stems and filler flowers and use lots and lots of different combinations. So keep that in mind. In this flower set, so flower set 2, I'm going to use this long stem. In the original flower set, so the filler flower, I don't know if I do very many projects without that filler flower. I just love it so much. In the foliage set 4, so we're going to use one of these two little vines. Really doesn't matter which one, just a small foliage. And then in foliage set 2, we're going to use this one here, and actually it turns this way, so it's the little ivy that hangs down. And then in this set, I don't recall that I've used this in a video. I may have, but I love this little flower. This is from the Bible journaling set, the Bible flower set, and I'm going to use this one right here. Okay, so that is a lot of stamps, but so fun to put this all together, and I think you're going to really enjoy this little project. So we're going to start out by stamping the basic image, and that would be the window, the watering can, the little cat, and this little planter here with the pot. So we're going to get all those things stamped first, and then we're going to go on from there. So we're going to start out with the window, and the biggest thing about these is just make sure it's on your block straight, so that it's easy for you to stamp onto your watercolor paper. And remember, I'm just doing this the inside. So I'm going to start out with my dark brown. And really in this case, you could start out with the blue too. It's not really going to make that much difference in this case. So either one, but we're going to use two colors. And I'm just inking up, of course, the areas that I want. And if you get a little bit of this shutter in there, don't worry about that because we can just wash it out. Sometimes you get just a hint of another little line that you don't want in there, and that's not a big deal. Okay, so now I'm going to stamp this off because I really want this kind of light. So I'm just going to take my an extra piece of paper here and just stamp that off. And then I'm ready now to stamp this onto my watercolor paper. Okay, that looks pretty good, just like that. I want that really light, so perfect. So let's go ahead and now add that little watering can onto here. And I, of course, am going to use my positioner because there's just no way to guess where that's gonna go. And you know, with watercolor stamps, they are going to be rubber. So it's really important that they're rubber. It holds the color better, and they just work better than clear. So that is always an issue, kind of, as to where to stamp that and how to line that up. But I think a positioner just does the trick. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this in the corner just like this. And I'm just going to place that line. So you see where the line of the window is, I'm just going to place this little watering can right over that line. Remove this, just huff on it a little bit. And you know, when you're stamping these, just lightly stamp them. You know, you don't have to just mash that into the paper. Just keep your hand really light, good firm pressure, and that will do the trick so you don't get too much color into the lines. Okay, so let's go on now. We're going to stamp the little planter, and we're going to do that also with the dark brown and the dark blue right over the top. And I'm just going to stamp it down about here. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to adjust my camera a little bit here because I feel like I'm getting off the page. Okay, there we go. That looks good. So now let's go ahead and add the little cat in here. So again, with the positioner, and you can just keep rotating this around. So you can see I've got, you know, the little image on there already, but I could just rotate that around. And I'm just going to ink this little guy with the brown and the blue because I want to kind of leave him white, so I want him just to be a little gray. And in this case, I am for sure going to stamp him off because I want him really, really light. And I'm going to stamp him in the corner and just place him right in that little planter. And you can see there's a nice little opening. Perfect. He'll just fit right in here just like that. Okay, one more little element, and that is the little pot, and we're going to hang that right next to the window. And again, use my positioner, so I'm going to turn it again. I actually have 4 open corners here. So, and this one too is going to be very light. And I'm just inking it with the dark brown. I'm going to stamp it off, stamp it onto my, and I think that is going to be just perfect, right about there. And again, very light pressure. Okay, so we have got our basic combination here, and we are ready to start working on this. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, is to pull the colors out of the lines, and you can really start anywhere. It really doesn't matter. Make sure my brush is wet. So I've wet my brush, pinched it off, and I'm just getting the basics done here. So just just pull the color out of the lines, just to start. You don't have to get them all. And remember, you know, when we're doing a window, we want to get that color to the outside too, because this window is attached to a wall. So we don't want it to look like it's kind of freestanding. So make sure that you pull that color to the outside whenever you're doing a window like this. Go on to the little pot here, and you can see I'm not being very careful, just kind of starting out here, dragging the color out of the lines. And when you use that mix of color, you get a really, really nice combination of color. And I think that adds a lot to making these little compositions look realistic. You know, we want them kind of to look rustic and a little abstract, and I think that really helps to mix color. When you get too much of the same color on here, I think that makes it look flat and doesn't add enough interest. So the goal is always to end up with a little composition that looks like a painting that you can send to someone, give as a gift, and have someone look at that and go, wow, I didn't know you could paint. And thinking that you spent maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours on it. And honestly, even these little compositions that are more complex, they're still quick and easy. I mean, compared to having to paint, you know, an entire picture, they're still super easy. Okay, so I'm going to now darken in my little guy's eyes here, and I'm just going to use, I can just use a fine tip of my pencil. Just something that's really fine tip. You can use a ballpoint pen. You can use, you know, a tiny little Sharpie or a, you know, any kind of pen that has a fine tip. I tend to do a lot with a pencil. I think it just kind of does the trick. So it doesn't need to be anything fancy. Okay, so we're starting to get a good combination of color in here, and we can kind of move on to the next step, and that's to start adding some color to these elements. So we're going to need some color onto our palette. This is the light blue, number 526. I'm going to add some dark blue to it. And be careful when you're adding, so, you know, when I'm coloring onto my stamp, I'm coloring the brown and then the blue on the top. So you can see on here, I don't know if you can see on my palette really clearly, but I've got some gray mixed in here. So when you want that really bright blue, just kind of, you know, scribble that off onto your palette so that you don't end up with kind of a muddied color. So I'm just using a baby wipe now and taking this off so that I've got that true blue color without that gray mixed in. Okay, so let's see. I think I need some green. This is a very cool green. And I think we are good to get going. Okay, so let's start out with the background, and that is the wall. And I'm just gonna mix some color here. I'm gonna take some of this blue and very lightly just brush in a little bit of color in the background. I want to see that this is a wall that this little window is on. And I also want to have a bit of a shadow behind here. So I think that's going to add to the, you know, whole dimension of the painting. And you can just, you know, you can just mix any color. So really, really lightly, we'll just get some color in here. I'm going to take some of this blue now and add some color to my little watering can. Remember, color is always added after, so you want to stamp it in that combination of color and then add, you know, your secondary color later. So be sure to leave that highlight in the center and just put this color on very carefully. And you can see I'm kind of using a mix of color. I think that adds a lot. And the more that you do this, the more comfortable you'll get, you know, mixing the colors together. The nice thing about a palette is that you can do that, and actually you'll kind of get used to just grabbing color off of it. I don't clean my palettes very often. I just add more color to them and throw them in a drawer. So you can do that too. And sometimes you'll just grab a really cool color that's a really nice mix of 3 or 4 different ones, and you'll just love it. So sometimes you just get a really nice surprise that way. Okay, so we've got that done. Let's go on now to the little planter, or the little pot. And I think I'll do this one, some green. And again, so important to show that highlight on there. It's really, really important to see that. And make sure, you know, that those areas are darker on the sides. And if you notice, you know, you're getting too much of a single line here, you know, too straight of a line, just pinch your brush off, get it drier and drier, drier, and then just blend that color out. I'm just going to add a little more in here now for a little detail. This is kind of becoming my trademark detail here. I just love stripes on these little pots. They're just so cute, and so I usually put them on every time. Okay, so let's go on. We're going to do this little cat now, and I'm just going to take a little tiny bit of this blue, and I mean a tiny, tiny bit. And I'm just going to leave him white. And I've already got quite a bit of color in here. He's going to have some shadows, you know, from the flowers that are in the planter. And of course, underneath here, he's going to have a little shadow, but we can do a little more of that later. Okay, so let's go on to the window. And I'm going to put a little detail in here because I want to show a little curtain. So I'm just taking this blue now, dark blue, and I'm just coloring in the window here. It's so fun. And it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, really doesn't. And I think the less you stress out about it, I think the happier you'll be with it. You know, just let it go. Put that color on and just let it be. And then up here, so we want to create some little detail in the curtains. Make it look like they're kind of hanging down. And then in here, you know, inside the window, you know, when you're kind of looking in, you're going to kind of see this is going to be a little darker in here. So we can kind of do that, just bring a little bit of this color in. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good here. So I'm gonna just add a little more shadow under this little windowsill. And then under this little pot here. Maybe under this little handle. Shadows really make a big difference. If you can just, you know, remember to do that and not be too intimidated by it, it's going to really make a difference in your composition. Okay, we're making some progress here. All right, let's go on now to the fun part. And I think the fun part is always adding the flowers and the foliage to it. So let's do that. I'm going to start out by adding some foliage to this little pot here. This is that tiny little vine that's in the newest foliage set. And I'm just going to add a few little things out here. Remember, you can just ink the parts that you want. So I'm only inking about half of this little vine. And then I'm going to take this one and just maybe, oops, use a different green here. And just hang this one off the edge. And you can see I went up above the pot, and that will give you a little more detail up here. So just brush that in, add a little more water, and you can now make this a little bit longer. So just clean that off and just ink the bottom. There we go. And if you like a little more detail, you don't have to add much water to it, just a little bit. And then let's add some flowers in here. You can use any filler flowers. Well, you can use any flowers or foliage in these. And I'm just stamping them a few times. And maybe adding another one out there. And just touch it. You know, you're just touching it with your brush. And always remember, when you're going from red to another color, make sure you are cleaning your brush off, because that red just wants to stay on there. And I'm just going to take my fine tip now, this is my fine tip, and just add some little centers in here. I think that's really fun to do. And let's go on to this one down here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some of this foliage, same little vine, and just tuck a little bit in here, and maybe just a few out here. And you can do as much of this as you want, really. And you know, as many times as I've done these little, you know, paintings, they're different every time. I could do this one, you know, a dozen times, and it's going to turn out totally different every time, but it's so fun. It's what makes it unique, special. So I'm going to take this long one again, and I'm just going to clean that top off, because I just want to hang the bottom. This little guy is so versatile. It's just really fun to use. And maybe I'll just hang a few off here. And especially because, you know, when you're using stamps, I know I say this over and over again, but ink the parts that you want to use. So if you want just a little trailer, just ink this little tail, and then drag this up to the top. So if you want something coming out of the little planter, use the top part up here. So they're going to look different. That's also really important, is that when you stamp this, it doesn't look like a stamp. You know, we want it to look like a little painting. So we want it to look different. Okay, so I'm going to go on to my little filler flower here, and I'm just going to ink a couple. And you can also just ink one. So if you want this to be just a few little flowers in here, just ink a single. So just like that. So cute and fun. And I'm going to come back in here again with my blue. And just kind of next to these little vines, I'm just going to add a little shadow with that blue. Remember, this is against a wall, so we want to show that as much as we can. Okay, so our long stems, let's add our long stems in here. And this little guy is kind of crushing this little window box, so it might be kind of fun to hang these kind of out over the side. So two colors on this. This is the red and a green. I don't need too long of a stem. Do that again. And again. Just keep hitting that. There we go. Looks pretty good. And just hit it with a little water. It's amazing how the water changes everything. And remember with the long stem, never hit the stem, only just the bloom. Okay, so we are about finished. One more detail, and this is a really fun thing to do. So you can add wall texture. There's a whole set of stamps to do wall texture, but you can do a really simple version with a ruler and a pencil. And sometimes I do this just because it's really simple and easy to do. It doesn't require any masking. And just take a pencil and a ruler and just eyeball this. Just eyeball it. You know, it doesn't have to be exact. Better if it's not. And just kind of, you know, go in between these little, you know, these little flowers. And just keep coming down, maybe one more here. Okay, just like that. You can see that adds a whole nother element to it. And then what I do is I just take a little bit of the blue now and just kind of go underneath it. Just a little light, very light. And it just kind of creates this really nice little texture. And you can see we really have this little window on a wall now. And that shadow is going to make that look like a board because of that shadow that's underneath. Okay, so I am just going to add a little detail in here. Make sure that's really dark inside there and here. This is just the fine tip of my blue. I just tend to do this just to make sure I can see those dark areas. I think that just really kind of pops things up. Okay, and if you want, you can go back and erase. Once this is all dry, go back and erase your lines, and it'll be even more subtle and light and beautiful. Or you can just leave them on there, like I would do. Okay, so be sure to sign and date. And put that on a card or put it in a frame and give it away to someone. You're going to make their day. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more watercolor, check me out on Instagram, bonniekrebs.biblejournaling, for lots more watercolor and ideas. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next week with a new project.